What's up, everybody? Chester ARP Church Devotional Podcast. Clint Davis, your host. Hey, thanks so much for being with us again today as we read through the book of Ezra. We are in Ezra chapter 8, the story of Ezra's return trip to Jerusalem after the temple was built so that he could then teach the people how to live in relationship to God. Ezra is given an order by King Artaxerxes to return, and he's told by King Artaxerxes, take whomever you wish with you. And so Ezra begins to gather up people to go with him from Babylonia to Jerusalem, make this big journey back to Jerusalem to reestablish. It's a sense where this is a second wave of exile. So the first wave came and the initial return, the building of the temple. Now Ezra's bringing with him a second wave of people to return and reestablish the land of Jerusalem and reestablish the worship of God in Jerusalem. It's already been established, but strengthen it, I guess, is a better way to put that, and to teach the people how to live in relationship with God. As they're returning, Ezra is a man who is a student of the law of God. He understands the commandments of God and how to apply them to daily life, and so he is certainly the appropriate person to go and teach the returned exiles how to live in relationship with God. And so he gathers up people to go with him, heads of the fathers' houses, etc. And if you work through verses 1 through 15, I'm not going to go into great detail and read them this morning. A lot of names in there, a lot of challenges, and it's just a genealogy. But the conclusion of it is almost 1,500 people that God sends with Ezra to Jerusalem to go, and they encamp at a place called Ahava. That's in verse 15. I gathered them all, everybody with them, to the river that runs to Ahava, and there we camped 3 days. And as Ezra looked over everybody who is going to return with him to Jerusalem, he notices something. He does not have any of the sons of Levi. He has no Levites. Now, this is a significant issue for Ezra because Ezra is returning with vessels and resources that are to go to be used in the worship of God in the temple of God. And so they need to be cared for along the way by people who are specifically trained to care for them and people who are specifically given the responsibility to care for them. One of the things that runs throughout the Old Testament, even in these post-exilic days, is the emphasis of the vessels and the things devoted to the worship of God in the temple being cared for properly by the Levites. Not everyone is able to care for those vessels and care for those things that are devoted to the worship of God. You may remember the story of Ezra in the Old Testament in 2 Samuel, I believe it's 2 Samuel 6, when David is wanting to bring the Ark of the Covenant into Jerusalem. And as a result of that, maybe 2 Samuel 5, they put it on a cart, and the cart, the oxen stumbles, the wheel breaks, and Uzzah steps up to touch the ark of the Lord, and as he does, he dies immediately. And David is challenged by the prophet there. It says, you did this the wrong way. You should have had the Levites carry the ark. And then they go back and have the Levites carry the ark, and everything is great. And it seems like a harsh penalty, but the point of it is that that's God's dwelling place on earth with his people. It's God's prerogative to say, this is holy unto me, and I have specific ways in which this is to be handled, because this is a demonstration of my condescending grace to you, condescending in a proper sense, not in a negative sense, but in a stooping down to you to live in relationship with you. And as a result of that, I want these things handled appropriately. Well, certainly Ezra understands that. And so Ezra says, hey, listen, if we are going to take these vessels back, we are going to take these goods and this gold and this silver that's to be devoted unto the Lord. It needs to be handled properly, and it needs to be guarded by people who have a specific calling to do that. And so we need some Levites. After all, we're going to establish the worship of God. We need to take more Levites with us. So he sends word to this place that we're told Iddu is living, this man named Iddu, and he is in this place called Cassiphia. We don't know much about it. It appears to me, though, that maybe this is a training ground for Levites, that Levites are still being trained for how to properly handle the vessels of God and lead the service and the worship of the temple, even in the period of exiles, because if they are able to ever return to Jerusalem and reestablish the worship of God, the temple's rebuilt, they would need the Levites. And so it seems to me that they're still going through some training, perhaps, and maybe this is like a seminary location, to use modern language. The Levites are being trained. So he says, hey, listen, we need some Levites. So the Levites come, and They've added to the number, so you're about 1,500. By the time you get all these numbers of the Levites there, you're up to about 1,800 people, men plus their families returning with Ezra. So we got a big band of people returning. And Ezra brings everybody together at the river of Ahava, verse 21, and there he proclaims a fast, and this is what he says. I proclaimed a fast there at the river Ahava, that we might humble ourselves before our God, to seek from him a safe journey for ourselves, our children, and all our goods. For I was ashamed to ask the king for a band of soldiers and horsemen to protect us against the enemy on our way, since we had told the king, the hand of our God is for good on all who seek him, and the power of his wrath is against all who forsake him. So we fasted and implored our God for this, and he listened to our entreaty. And so they gathered together. Now, think about this for a moment with me, and I'm going to run long on time, so let me think about it quickly. But think about it for just a brief second with me. They are returning with tons and with unbelievable, I say tons in an exaggerated sense, but a tremendous amount of silver and gold and very important vessels. They did not have armored trucks the way you and I have armored trucks. If we need to transport something incredibly valuable, we have proper ways to do it where we can ensure its safety. They did not have that. They are going from Babylonia to Jerusalem with all of this gold and silver and these resources and these vessels, etc., and they've got a tremendous treasure chest with them, and they are going on a dangerous journey. I've been reading through and listening to some podcasts telling the story of the Wild West in America in the 19th century, and the ways in which that these outlaws robbed trains and wagon roads, and the Indians did the same thing, because it was an opportunity when people are out there alone and exposed. It was an opportunity to get the goods that they had. Well, that's exactly what's going to be happening to Ezra's band. And so they're traveling, and they're concerned, so they place all of the vessels in the care of the priests and say, hey, listen, and Levites, and say, listen, guard these with your life. This is your job to guard these. So Ezra gives that to them. And then the rest of the men are there to keep all the goods safe, and the children safe, and the women safe, and the herds safe, and all the things that they need to keep safe as they make this long journey from Babylon to Jerusalem, exposed. And it's interesting, Ezra says, I called a fast because we needed the good hand of our God to be upon us as we go to Jerusalem to protect us. And he's trusting that God will do it. But it's interesting, he says, I was afraid to ask the king for an escort. The king would have given him an escort. He gave him everything else he needed, but he was afraid to ask. He trusted God. That's not I think there is something to be emulated here in that he trusts the Lord, and they have a fast, and they trust that God's going to provide for them. But I also don't think that this is, hey, listen, he's just a man of great faith. And he says, I was afraid to ask for an escort. Had he asked for an escort, he probably would have received an escort. He gave him everything else, but he was afraid to ask for it. That's not a demonstration per se of great faith. It's a resting in the God, but ultimately, it's not the wisest thing to do. The wisest thing would have said, hey, king, will you give us an escort? You're giving us everything else. Will you give us an escort? And the king would have said yes. But they didn't do that. They trusted the Lord, and as in doing so, the Lord was faithful to them, and he blessed them. I think that if Ezra was asked later, he probably would have said, I wish I'd asked the king for an escort. Saved himself a lot of heartache and a lot of grief. Certainly the Lord provided, but it would have saved him a lot of heartache and grief had he asked for an escort. And as he got that escort, it's not spiritual to not ask for an escort. And as they get to Jerusalem, then they're able to bring all the goods that were there with them, and to reestablish the worship of God even more fully as they get to Jerusalem and bring everything into the temple that had been given to them, and offer their sacrifices on behalf of the glorious name of their God, but also on behalf of King Artaxerxes, who offers sacrifices unto the Lord. I'm out of time. You guys have a great day. God bless you. Catch you next time.